Which is the mysterious boy who became perfect boyfriend material? Naruto x Sabrina Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Greendale's sky is the color of steeped tea by 6 o'clock, the clouds hanging low like worn out curtains. Streetlights come on with that slight cough they have when autumn is sneaking in, and the basketball court behind Greendale's community center becomes a shallow bowl of sound. Rubber soles, metal chain nets sighing, a laugh that's really just a breath let go of a little too fast. Rubbing his sore arms, bruised sides, and a scratching dried blood under his nose, a young troubled youth named Uzumaki Naruto watched as most left. Tuesday meant street ball, brutal ball. The absence of officials to call fouls made the games far more interesting and exciting. He wasn't done yet, with the boxing gym not opening for another 3 hours and work starting in 5, he had nowhere to be and no one who wanted him. Hopping up, scoring a clear three-pointer again and again, he paid no mind to the noise around him. His story is rather dull and tragic. Born an orphan, he spent his life in and out of different groups and foster care homes. It was never his scene, mostly ending with getting in fights or what he's doing now, throwing a ball through a hoop again and again until his palms were raw and blistered. He was able to legally live by himself after an agreement with his foster home and the agency. If he continued to do decently in school and stayed out of legal trouble, he would likely remain in some apartment that they also owned, albeit unironically. The owners, Mr. and Ms. Diller, owned half of the apartment complexes in town and the surrounding cities. Their foster homes typically consisted of siblings or groups of orphans living in an apartment, allowing them to receive the nice foster home bonus. How kind. It didn't matter what matters is keeping himself awake and busy. The less time sleeping, the better. After some time, he moved on to drills, stutter step, shoulder fake, imagining a sliding pass to someone taller for a layup, anything and everything to keep himself distracted and awake. After hours of practice, his breath wasn't ragged, stiff, or tired in the slightest. The gym was now open, and much like he and a handful of others, he made their way to practice. One of the only gyms in town was rather rough. The door creaked open, and the smell hit like a punch, sweat baked into old mats, mildew clinging to the walls. Breathing felt like swallowing rust. However, it's the only gym in town, where else would he box? Just you tonight, a young girl spoke out behind the sign-in counter, seeming somewhat annoyed that he showed up. Probably hoping for a day of silence where there was no one to smell and no one to make noise. I'll keep it down, promise. No bag today. Annoying as it is, he didn't want to get on her bad side. Stepping towards the far corner, the one with the least grime on the floor, well, what he hoped was grime, where a cracked mirror leaned against the wall. No bag tonight, just him and his reflection. He raised his fists and let his shoulders roll, the way the pros on TV did. A long exhale, then he snapped a jab into the stale air. His knuckles cut through nothing, but in his mind, there was always someone there, someone bigger, faster, crueler. The gym might have been empty, but his head was full of ghosts. Jab, cross, jab, jab, hook. His sneakers squeaked against the warped wood, each pivot sounding louder than it should in the hollow space. Sweat collected fast on his brow, but his breath stayed steady, smooth, like he could do this for hours. He moved with rhythm, shoulder feints, quick steps, the slap of feet shifting side to side. A phantom opponent circled with him, ducking his swings, forcing Naruto to think. He imagined slipping under a hook, firing back with a sharp counter to the ribs. He made the sounds too, a quick hiss of air each time his fist shot forward, a grunt when he drove an uppercut up through the space. The girl behind the desk glanced up once, rolled her eyes, and returned to her phone. He barely noticed. This counted until an hour before his late-night shift at work started. Showering and changing into a spare set of clothing that was always here, he signed out. Good form, Naruto, the worker said with a hint of care that was a little too much. Not good enough. His arms still bent too far without him thinking. His opener needs to be smoother, and his attacks need work on mix-ups. You're 14, a kid. Most adults have more trouble, she said while he wasn't really paying her any mind. Everyone at the gym knew him. If he wasn't pushing himself, it meant he was browning. Throwing his backpack over one shoulder, he stepped out into the cool night air. The door clicked shut behind him, and for the first time in hours, the world was quiet. No squeak of sneakers, no hiss of breath, no thud of fists, just the chill air brushing against his still warm skin. He didn't make it far. Someone was standing under the weak halo of a streetlight, struggling with a roll of tape and a stack of posters. Every time she slapped one against the brick wall, it peeled off halfway, curling like it didn't want to be there either. She didn't notice him watching her struggle. She was hard to miss, even under that sickly streetlight. Blonde hair cut neat and sharp ending by her shoulders, having a slight twist and twirl, the kind you'd think belonged in a bigger city, not taped up against the bricks of Greendale. A black headband kept it steady, but a few strands slipped loose and caught the light like they didn't care. The red coat she wore stood out too, bright against the gray wall and the dull posters peeling around her. It wasn't new, the cuffs were frayed, buttons a little loose, but on her it looked sharp anyway. A satchel knocked against her hip, heavy with papers, notebooks, and pens jammed in at odd angles. Naruto found his eyes lingering longer than he meant to. She looked awake, put together, the kind of person who belongs somewhere, not drifting from courts to gyms to late shifts to keep from overthinking. He pulled his gaze away quickly, stuffing his hands into his pockets, no use staring. Naruto slowed as she fought with the roll of tape again, the poster sliding down the wall like it was determined to escape. She cursed under her breath, shaking her fingers free of the sticky mess. "Hey," he said, low enough that it almost blended with the scrape of his shoes. She jumped a little, like she hadn't expected him to speak after fixing her poster. When she turned to face him, the light caught her features in a way that froze him for a second. Her skin looked pale, moonlight pale, like she carried a different kind of glow that didn't belong to Greendale. The dark lipstick she wore, near black, made her mouth stand out sharply against the rest of her face. It shouldn't have worked in a place like this, but on her it did, more than he wanted to admit. "Let me." He reached for the poster before she could argue, peeling it from her fingers like it was the most natural thing in the world. A strip of tape snapped loose with a sharp rip, and he smoothed the paper flat against the brick, palm sliding down until it clung like it was supposed to, quick, clean, no hesitation. Sabrina blinked, eyebrows lifting. "Well, guess you've got hidden talents." Naruto shoved the tape roll back into her hand, already stuffing his own into his pockets again. "Not really, just know how to make things stick." Her smile tilted, sly and curious, like she wanted to ask more. For a moment, the quiet street felt heavier, filled with the weight of her eyes on him. He broke it first, glancing at the poster. "Greendale Gazette. Looking for contributors. School paper, huh?" he asked, voice flat, though he couldn't stop himself from reading the bold print twice. Sabrina's smile widened, quick and fox-like. "Don't sound so impressed. It's not gossip, if that's what you're thinking. I'm one of the lead reporters, so I should know." She was so proud of that, it's adorable. He smirked faintly, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Didn't say anything. You didn't have to. You've got that look." She leaned back against the wall. Sabrina tilted her head, watching him like she was lining up a headline in her mind. Her eyes flicked over him again, messy red hair, bright, seeming to be purple eyes, bruised lip, shoulders that filled his hoodie better than she expected. She must have gotten lucky tonight, the boy who decided to help just happened to be hot. Naruto raised a brow at her tone. "What look?" "The tired kind," she said smoothly, masking the thought with a teasing lilt. "Like you'd rather be anywhere else, but here you are, helping me tape up boring posters." "I should probably say thanks." He shrugged, half smirk tugging at his mouth. "Don't mention it." Sabrina tilted her head, watching him like she was lining up a headline in her mind. "You know, you'd actually make a good piece." Naruto frowned. "What, an interview? For the Gazette?" Her grin returned, sly and certain. "A profile. You're that guy the first hear about. The one that beats every guy at basketball but doesn't join a team, the guy that gets in fights, spends his afternoons in the gym, and works at Cerberus Books, my favorite bookstore." "It's the only bookstore." Sabrina laughed under her breath. "Exactly, which makes it my favorite by default. But that's not the point. The point is, people already talk about you. You're a story walking around pretending you're not. Or maybe people should mind their own business. Where's the fun in that?" She shot back, tilting her head. Her pen was already in hand, notebook flipped open, as if she could pin him down right there on the sidewalk. "You've got that whole mystery thing going, and trust me, Naruto, it's terrible for keeping a low profile." Naruto turned, shoulders hunching as he started walking. "Then maybe stop looking." But Sabrina only grinned wider, jogging a step to keep up. "Sorry, not how reporters work." Placing his hand on his neck, he stared at the girl who was far too pretty for his own good. "You're lucky you know." "Why's that?" "I can't say no to a face like that." For the first time, her smirk faltered, replaced by a surprised laugh. Quick, bright, like she hadn't meant to let it slip out. "That's either the smoothest thing I've heard all week, or the rudest. Take your pick." Naruto kept walking, eyes on the cracked pavement. She fell in beside him again, shaking her head but smiling anyway. "You're something else, Naruto. I have work, but you can ask me questions there." Sabrina's brows shot up, her grin returning full force. "At Cerberus, you're giving me an interview slot." "Not an interview." He cut her a sharp look. "Just questions, while I'm stocking shelves." "Sounds like an interview to me." She flipped her notebook open, already scribbling something down as if she'd scored a victory. Naruto sighed, pulling his hood up again. "Do whatever you want, just don't get in the way." Sabrina fell back a step, smirking as she tapped her pen against the page. "Deal, but fair warning, I never waste a good story." The bell over the door gave a tired jingle as Naruto pushed it open, holding it just long enough for Sabrina to slip in after him. Cerberus Books was dim and narrow, with shelves that leaned like they'd been carrying too much weight for too many years. The air smelled of dust and ink, with a faint trace of coffee from a machine that hadn't worked right since last winter. The horror theme was clear as day, cobweb decorations that never got taken down, posters of classic monster films yellowing on the walls, a fake raven perched above the counter. One of the owner's obsessions, right behind books and coffee. "Ah, Naruto, on time like always," came a booming voice from behind the counter. Dr. Cerberus, real name Kenny Cosgrove, though no one called him that, rose from his stool like a vampire rising from a coffin. His cape, he actually wore one, though no one was sure if it was ironic, swished as he clutched a steaming mug of coffee. Then his sharp eyes landed on the girl behind Naruto. "And Sabrina Spellman, glad to see you, of all people, today. But, together." His grin widened, wolfish and theatrical. "Tell me this isn't fate, my most mysterious employee and Greendale High's sharpest wit crossing paths in my humble sanctum of shadows." Dr. Cerberus swept a hand dramatically over the counter, nearly spilling his coffee. "You've come at the perfect hour, Sabrina. The witching hour approaches, though technically, it's just after 8. Still, one must keep the spirit alive." Sabrina's grin widened as she leaned against the counter. "I like it, the whole town could use a little more drama. What's tonight's theme, vampires, werewolves, or cosmic terror?" His eyes lit up, as if she'd just asked him to name his children. Cosmic terror. Lovecraft himself would weep to see how small minds ignore the infinite abyss just beyond the veil of stars. He clutched at his chest, swaying with delight. Naruto reappeared from the stockroom, a box of paperbacks balanced on his shoulder. He shot Sabrina a look as she and Cerberus laughed over some ridiculous story about haunted typewriters. "Don't encourage him," Naruto muttered, dropping the box onto the counter with a heavy thud. Sabrina raised an eyebrow at him, her smile turning sly. "What, you don't like haunted typewriters?" "They're just typewriters," he said flatly, tearing open the box. "Ah, the eternal skeptic." Dr. Cerberus wagged a finger at him. "Naruto has no appreciation for the supernatural. A shame, considering how perfectly tragic a figure he would make in a gothic novel." Sabrina laughed again, eyes bright. "Yeah, I can see it, brooding loner, working nights in a creepy bookstore, haunted by his own past. You're basically a character already." Naruto shoved a stack of books into her arms without looking at her. "If you're gonna hang around, make yourself useful." She held the books against her chest, smirking as she followed him toward the shelves. "Fine, but I'm still writing down, brooding loner with a gothic day job. That one's too good to waste." Naruto groaned under his breath, but she caught the faintest twitch of a smile before he turned away. Sabrina flipped her notebook open against the counter at Cerberus books, pen tapping in a steady rhythm. She had a dozen questions scrawled down already, but now that Naruto was standing in front of her, stacking paperbacks with more care than she expected from someone with a split lip and bruised knuckles, her plan wavered. He wasn't ignoring her. In fact, he glanced at her more than once, and when she finally asked, "So, what's school like for you?" he answered, "Loud," he said with a crooked grin, sliding a row of horror novels into place. "Teachers try too hard, kids don't try at all. Feels like I'm the only one awake half the time." Sabrina blinked, not what she expected. No defensiveness, no walls. Just honesty. "If I could, I would skip, but I have to receive a 3.0 GPA at least." Her pen actually paused mid-scratch. That detail was so ordinary, so normal. Not the kind of thing you'd expect from Greendale's roughest rumor. She'd been prepared for shrugs and silence, maybe a snide comment or two, not grade requirements. 3.0, she echoed, studying him. "That's kind of impressive, actually." Naruto shrugged, shifting another stack of paperbacks. "Not really, just a deal with the agency. As long as I don't screw up school, they let me live alone. Guess I like that more than failing algebra." Sabrina found herself smiling before she realized it. He's supposed to be this bruiser who picks fights and hides in the gym, she thought, but here he is, talking about GPAs and agencies like it's just the weather. She scribbled a note in the margin of her page, "Not who he seems." "Well," she said, tilting her head, "if you're holding up your end of the deal, maybe I should put you in the Gazette's next feature, Greendale High's model student." Naruto snorted, but it wasn't sharp, it was amused. "Don't push it, reporter. Don't push it, reporter." The way he said it made her grin. Not mean, not dismissive. More like he didn't hate the idea as much as he wanted her to think. "So what's your day actually like?" she asked, leaning against the shelf as if they had all the time in the world. "Classes, lunch, people." Naruto wiped his hands on his hoodie, then shoved them back into his pockets. "Day starts with history, which is just me fighting not to sleep. Maths after that, boring, but I'm decent at it. Lunch is loud, too many people, not enough food. Afternoons are science, gym, and English. English isn't bad, though. I like when we read stuff instead of just answering grammar drills." Sabrina tilted her head, eyebrows raised. "English. He actually likes English. Wait, you like reading?" He gave her a look like she'd just accused him of something. Then, slowly, yeah. When I have the time, I find that some books have a greater impact than people expect. I don't say that out loud much. She blinked again, caught off guard for the third time that night. The bruised, restless boy she'd heard rumors about, he liked reading. Her pen scratched fast across the page. And what about people? She pressed gently. Naruto's shoulders shifted, not tense, just thoughtful. Most don't bother me, I don't bother them, easier that way. Rumors fill in the rest. Sabrina chewed her lip, watching him. He wasn't defensive, he wasn't shutting her out. He was telling her. And every answer peeled back another layer she hadn't expected. Maybe the Gazette's been wasting its time writing about cafeteria food scandals, she teased. This stuff's way more interesting. He laughed under his breath, stacking another book. Don't blame me if your readers get bored. Sabrina tapped her pen against the notebook, lost in thought. This was better than she hoped, better material, better conversation. And it gave her an opening. Well, they won't be bored for long, she said, sliding her notebook shut with a snap. I'm putting together something, ink and impact. It's a showcase for the school's writing team, but really, it's about showing people that stories matter. That we matter. I want Greendale to pay attention. Naruto raised an eyebrow. And you think I fit into that? Sabrina leaned in, eyes bright. Because you've got a story worth hearing. And whether you like it or not, people already want to listen. Sabrina tapped her pen against the open notebook, eyes glinting like she'd found her angle. And what about people? She pressed. Naruto slid the last paperback into place, spine aligned, and let the silence stretch. For a second, she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he leaned his weight against the shelf, arms crossed. People are, people, loud, messy, some stick around, most don't. It wasn't much, but it was honest, and Sabrina smiled at that, small, knowing, like she'd just been handed something valuable. She shut her notebook with a snap. Well, maybe you'll make an exception, she said, slipping the pen behind her ear. For what? My fundraiser night. Naruto gave her a flat look, but she barreled on before he could cut her off. Greendale Gazette's putting it together. The school's giving us the gym for a night, we're raising money for printing costs. We're doing a one-on-one basketball tournament, free throw contest, maybe even a bake sale if Mrs. Andrews can wrangle it. Her smile sharpened. You'd clean up in the 1v1s. He snorted, pushing off the shelf. Pass. Oh, come on. She stepped in front of him before he could duck into the stockroom again, her red coat brushing his arm. You spend half your life on a court anyway. Might as well get a trophy for it. I don't need a trophy. Fine. Glory, then. Don't need that either. Sabrina crossed her arms, tilting her head. You're really going to make me beg? Naruto rolled his eyes, but there was the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth. Not a good look for a reporter. Reporters do what they have to, she said breezily, though she was still watching him closely. And right now, I have to fill out a bracket. I need names, big ones. Otherwise, it's just, you know, Kevin Keller playing against Reggie Mantle while everyone yawns. He huffed out a laugh, short but real, and she pounced on it. There it is, she said, pointing at him like she'd caught him red-handed. See, you're already picturing yourself on that court, shutting Reggie down, proving everyone right about the rumors. Naruto shoved his hands deeper into his pockets. Rumors are trash, maybe, but sometimes they sell tickets. She let the words hang for a beat, then softened her voice, less sly, more earnest. Look, you don't have to win. You don't even have to care. Show up. Play. Help us raise some money so I don't have to beg Principal Hawthorne for scraps. He studied her for a moment, then glanced past her at the stack of freshly taped up posters peeking out of her satchel. The edges were crumpled, tape still clinging to them. She'd been out here alone, fighting with them in the dark. You really want this thing to work, huh? He said finally. Her grin returned, softer this time. More than you know. Naruto sighed through his nose, shoulders dropping. Free throws too. Free throw contests are just for fun. Winner gets a gift card to Pops. She smirked. Think you can handle that? He shook his head, muttering something under his breath, but she caught the words anyway. Guess I'll show up. Sabrina's smile broke wide, triumphant. Knew you would. Don't get ahead of yourself, he warned, already reaching for another box. If I lose the first round, that's on you. Oh, if you lose, she teased, scribbling his name down in her notebook, I'll just write a glowing feature on your free throw form. Everyone loves an underdog, he groaned, but she could see the fight draining out of him. Beneath it, though, there was something else. A spark, slight but there, the first hint that maybe, just maybe, he didn't mind being seen. Naruto had just started cutting open another box when Sabrina flipped her notebook open again, her pen tapping against the page. Actually, she began, eyes glinting with a different kind of mischief now. The fundraiser's not the only project I'm working on. Naruto didn't look up. Figures. She leaned a little closer, lowering her voice like she was letting him in on a secret. We're putting together a special column. Totally unofficial, Totally against Hawthorne's standards of propriety, so obviously the most popular one we run. Naruto finally glanced her way, brow raised. And that is, boyfriend material, she said swiftly, arming the very title of the column with jazz hands. He blinked. What? Her grin widened, sly and sharp. The girls on the Gazette and I started it last semester. Basically, we find guys around school, athletes, musicians, the ones people whisper about, and we do these little profiles. Personality, style, quirks, all the reasons they'd make or break as someone's boyfriend. Naruto gave her a flat, unimpressed look. Sounds dumb. Yeah, she shot back, tilting her head. Funny thing is, it's the most read piece we've ever done. Copies disappear the second they hit the cafeteria. He went back to stacking books, muttering. Greendale must be really desperate for entertainment. Sabrina smirked, flipping a page in her notebook like she was already drafting something. Maybe, or maybe people just like knowing who's worth their crushes. Not my problem. She tapped the pen against her lip, studying him openly now. See, that's where you're wrong. You're exactly the type we'd want. Naruto froze mid-stack, then slowly set the paperbacks down. The hell's that supposed to mean? Think about it, she said, ticking points off on her fingers. Mysterious, athletic. Rumors suggest you're in trouble, but you're actually a decent student. Works at a haunted bookstore. Broody enough to keep people guessing, but, her eyes narrowed playfully. Not so broody that you won't help a girl with her posters. Hey, I'm tired, not broody, it's different. He whined, causing her smile to grow so much more. The small personality peeking through someone who looks so dull is exciting to her. Oh, is it? She teased, leaning closer, notebook tucked to her chest like she might write it down. Because, tired, doesn't usually come with dramatic silences and tragic stares out bookstore windows. That's classic broody behavior. Naruto groaned, dragging a hand down his face. You're reaching. Placing the last book down, Naruto crouched to fiddle with the espresso machine, his fingers moving over the stubborn buttons and loose filter like he'd done it 100 times before. Well, he muttered, without looking up, one thing I know for sure is there's no use arguing with a woman that's made up her mind. Sabrina's laugh bubbled out before she could stop it, light and delighted. She tapped her pen against her notebook like she was putting a check mark next to his name. Oh, sensible, boyfriend material. Naruto shot her a flat look from under the shadow of his hood. That column's gonna get someone beat up one day. Maybe, she said, tilting her head, lips curving into a beautiful smile. But not you. Why not me? Because, she said, leaning on the counter, watching him closely, the only people who'd mess with you are the same ones who'd lose to you in the first round of our fundraiser tournament. He smirked faintly, just enough to show he'd heard her. You really don't give up, do you? Reporters don't, especially when the story's good. Naruto sighed, shaking his head as the espresso maker hissed to life. Guess that makes me the story, huh? Sabrina's eyes softened for a beat, catching the quiet in his tone. She flipped her notebook shut with a snap and tucked it under her arm. Yeah, she said, her smile turning smaller, more genuine. But only the good parts. The ones people don't usually get to see. For a moment, the hum of the machine filled the silence between them. Then Naruto let out a short laugh, half exasperated, half amused. Your trouble, he said. Sabrina hummed, stepping toward the door with a swing of her red coat. The fun kind. You keep talking, he muttered, but you still haven't answered the real question. Sabrina tilted her head, feigning innocence. Which is, he finally looked at her, deadpan. What kind of espresso do you want? For a beat, she blinked, then laughed, the sound quick and genuine, like he'd caught her off guard. That's the real question. Yeah, you've been hanging around, scribbling in that notebook, distracting me from work. The least you can do is put in an order. She smirked, setting the notebook down on the counter. Fine, something strong. No sugar. I like it bitter. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Figures. Why? Because it fits you, he said, fiddling with the machine. Sharp, a little dramatic, but, you keep people awake. That shut her up for once. She watched him pour, the steam curling between them, and when he finally slid the mug across the counter, she picked it up with a grin that didn't hide the faint pink creeping into her cheeks. Well, she said, lifting the cup in a mock toast. If this is boyfriend material, I'm impressed. Naruto smirked faintly, already turning back to the next box. It's just coffee. Sabrina murmured into her first sip, eyes glinting over the rim. We'll see about that. Naruto straightened up, wiping his palms on his hoodie like the espresso machine and boxes weren't enough to burn off his restless energy. Well, since we're adding to that list, he said, voiced casual but carrying that edge of challenge, I can bench 170. Squat 320. Deadlift a little over 4. Sabrina froze, cup halfway to her lips, eyes widening. 400, he shrugged like it was nothing. 420 on a good day. She set her cup down slowly, a grin tugging at her mouth. That's not normal, you know. That's, what's the word? Oh, right, ridiculous. Not ridiculous if you train, he said, leaning back against the counter. I don't skip days. Push, pull, legs, repeat. Simple math. Sabrina tilted her head, pen already scratching across the page. Simple math, he says, like half the guys at Greendale High aren't struggling to bench the bar without tipping over. He smirked faintly, eyes flicking to her notebook. Don't put that down. Too late, she sing-songed, jotting faster. Boyfriend material update. Uzumaki Naruto, resident powerhouse. Benches 170, squats 320, deadlifts 420. Basically a one-person moving company. Naruto groaned, dragging a hand through his hair. You make it sound stupid when you say it like that. Sabrina leaned over the counter, grinned sly and triumphant. No, I make it sound impressive. Admit it, you wanted me to write that down. Yeah, 100%. I didn't get these abs or arms for nothing. Naruto caught the teasing tilt of her smile, the way she wrote him down like he was just another rumor in ink. He let out a sharp breath through his nose, then set the box on the counter with a heavy thud. Fine, he said, tugging at his hoodie with one hand. You want proof? Sabrina arched a brow, a grin daring him. Go on then. Without another word, Naruto lifted the hem of his hoodie and t-shirt in one smooth pull, just enough for the overhead light to catch on the ridges of his stomach. His abs were carved tight, skin stretched lean over muscle that spoke of hours in the gym, not empty bragging. Sabrina's smirk faltered for half a heartbeat, replaced by something sharper, hungrier, before she masked it behind a sip of her empty cup. And that's just warm-up, he added, letting the shirt drop and rolling up his sleeves instead. His forearms flexed with casual strength, veins standing out against skin as he curled his fists and allowed the muscles in his biceps to bunch. Not oversized, not bodybuilder swollen, just lean, precise power. Benching, squatting, pulling, I don't waste my time in there, he said, like he was reading stats off a box score. Sabrina tilted her head, pretending to take notes but not bothering to hide how her eyes lingered. Well, she murmured, that's considerably better material than I expected. Naruto smirked, tugging his sleeves back down. Told you I don't get these for nothing. Her grin returned, sly and unshaken now, though her voice dropped just a touch lower. Careful, Uzumaki, at this rate, I'll need a whole column just for you. He gave a faint laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. Long as you spell my name right. She hasn't said his last name right since they met. How does she know his last name that close anyway? Sabrina snapped her notebook shut, eyes glinting. Don't worry, some stories don't need embellishment. Naruto tugged his sleeves back down, the faintest smirk tugging at his mouth as if he already regretted showing her anything at all. But Sabrina was quiet, too quiet. She leaned against the counter, fingers drumming idly on the closed notebook. Her grin was still there, sly and sharp, but her eyes lingered. Not just on his arms, or the memory of his stomach under the light, but on him, like she was suddenly seeing past the jokes, past the headlines she was scribbling. Well, she said finally, her voice softer than before, guess I can't call you broody anymore. You've officially graduated too. Her grin tilted, dangerously distracting. Naruto scoffed, shaking his head, but there was no edge to it. It's just training, doesn't mean anything. She murmured, twirling her pen between her fingers. Maybe to you, but trust me, some things don't need words to get noticed. He met her gaze then, steady, tired eyes locking with hers across the counter. For a beat, neither of them spoke. The espresso machine hissed, a low background note, filling the silence like a curtain pulled over something heavier. Sabrina's smile tilted, playful but edged with challenge. Ready for a tough one? Naruto leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. Shoot. Her eyes glinted, difference between a tampon and a pad. For a second, Naruto just blinked at her, as if she'd spoken another language. Then he let out a short, incredulous laugh. You're seriously asking me that? She tapped her pen against her notebook, her expression one of fake innocence. Come on, Mr. Bench 320. Let's see if you've got brains to go with all that muscle. Naruto groaned, dragging a hand down his face. Hell if I know. One goes in, one goes, not in. Sabrina burst out laughing, doubling over the counter. Oh my god, you said that out loud. What? That's right, isn't it? He shot back, half defensive, half grinning now despite himself. She shook her head, still laughing. Technically, yeah, but the way you phrased it, not in. That's the most tragically male answer I've ever heard. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck, his ears faintly pink. You ask a dumb question, you get a dumb answer. Not dumb, she corrected, biting back another laugh. Hilarious, and very, very quotable. He narrowed his eyes. Don't you dare put that in your paper. Her grin turned sly again. Boyfriend material column, Exhibit B, thinks pads are just tampons that don't go in. Naruto groaned, but the smile tugging at his mouth betrayed him. You're the worst. Maybe, Sabrina said, eyes dancing. But admit it, I keep you awake. You do, Naruto said, a smirk tugging at his mouth. Tampons are great for a busted nose, by the way. Sabrina blinked, caught mid-sip of her espresso. I'm sorry, what, boxing trick? He leaned casually against the counter, folding his arms. Nose won't stop bleeding, stick one in, keeps everything in place until it clots. Works better than anything else. She stared at him for a moment, then set her cup down slowly, her lips parting as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words right away. It wasn't a joke, he was serious, matter of fact, practical, the kind of thing only someone who lived in bruises would know. Sabrina tilted her head, watching him differently now. You've actually done that? Naruto shrugged. A couple of times. Better than bleeding all over the mat. Something about the way he said it, straight, unembellished, shifted the air between them. Sabrina's grin softened, the playful edge fading into something more curious, almost tender. She closed her notebook, no longer needing it. You're kind of unbelievable, you know that, she said, her voice quieter now. He raised an eyebrow, wary. That's supposed to be a compliment. She smirked faintly, but her eyes stayed locked on his. Yeah, it is. For the first time that night, she didn't laugh at his answer, didn't write anything down. She just let the silence sit, her gaze lingering on him a little longer than before, like she wasn't looking at a story anymore, but at the boy behind it. Naruto shifted under her stare, rubbing the back of his neck. It's just something you pick up. No big deal, maybe, Sabrina murmured, her smile curving smaller, more genuine. But still, makes you impossible to ignore. The espresso machine hissed again, but neither of them moved. The room suddenly felt smaller, the space between them sharper, like the world outside Cerberus books had faded away. Naruto had just leaned back against the counter when Sabrina's sly grin returned, her eyes glinting in the dim light. So, she said, pen tapping against her closed notebook, how exactly did you decide to stick a woman's tampon up your nose? Did she offer? Naruto barked out a short laugh, shaking his head. What? No, coach had a box in the med kit. Sabrina blinked, then covered her mouth, laughing. You're kidding. Dead serious. He tugged at his sleeve, still smirking. Said they worked better than cotton balls. First time I thought he was messing with me, but when your nose won't stop bleeding, you'll try anything. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing like she was lining him up for another headline. So, technically, you've got hands-on experience with feminine hygiene products. Naruto gave her a flat look, but the corner of his mouth betrayed him. You make it sound weirder than it is. Oh no, Sabrina said, fighting to keep a straight face. This is going in the column for sure. Boyfriend material. Mysterious, strong, and resourceful enough to improvise medical care with a tampon. Naruto groaned, dragging a hand down his face, though his grin broke through anyway. You're impossible, maybe, she said, her voice softer now, the laughter lingering but not hiding the warmth in her eyes. But, you're tougher than you let on. I like that. Naruto froze for a beat, caught by the shift in her tone. He didn't answer right away, but the quiet between them felt heavier than before, like she'd just let something slip and neither of them wanted to take it back. Sabrina swirled the last dregs of her espresso in the cup, eyes sharp with mischief. All right, she said, leaning back against the counter. One more for the boyfriend material files. Naruto sighed, already bracing himself. Here we go. What type are you into? She asked, her tone light but her gaze steady, watching him closely. He froze mid-motion, a paperback halfway onto the shelf. What, you know, she said innocently, tapping her pen against her notebook. Type, blonde, brunette, smart girls, troublemakers, athletes, poets, what gets Uzumaki Naruto's attention? Naruto slid the book into place a little too forcefully. I don't have a type. Sabrina smirked, pouncing on the deflection. Oh, come on, everyone has a type, even if it's just someone who doesn't annoy me. He gave her a flat, deadpan look. Then you're out, she gasped, clutching her chest in mock offense. Rude, and here I was about to write helpful, honest, maybe secretly sweet in your profile. Naruto shook his head, a smirk tugging at his mouth despite himself. I said maybe. Sabrina leaned closer across the counter, lowering her voice just enough to make the air between them shift. So, what's the answer then? What kind of girl actually keeps you awake? For a moment, he didn't respond. He just stared back at her, tired eyes sharp and unreadable, like he was weighing whether to give her anything at all. Then, slowly, he muttered, someone real. The teasing grin faltered on her lips, replaced by something softer. She didn't write that down. Didn't even lift her pen. She just let it hang in the space between them, heavier than any joke she could make. Her smile lingered, softer than before, but she tilted her head just enough to let a little of her mischief creep back in. And appearance? She asked, eyebrow arched, grin daring him. Naruto didn't even hesitate this time. His eyes flicked over her once, then he just said it, flat and certain. Blonde hair, shoulder length, wears that black headband to keep it out of her face. Pale skin, dark lipstick that makes you look like you walked out of some old movie. Red coat that's too bright for this town, but you wear it anyway. That's the type. Sabrina blinked, caught off guard. You're literally just describing me. Yeah, he said with a shrug, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. She opened her mouth to say something innovative, but nothing came out. Instead, she laughed under her breath, shaking her head. You're ridiculous. Naruto smirked faintly, already turning back to the shelf like he hadn't just stripped her down to details she hadn't thought anyone noticed. You asked. Bot bothered to hide the grin tugging at his mouth. He leaned an elbow on the counter, just watching her. Her pale cheeks had gone soft pink, blooming into a deeper red that almost matched the coat she was so proud of. For once, Sabrina Spellman, the girl with the sly notebook and a comeback for everything, had nothing to say. She fumbled with her pen, flipping the notebook open and shut, like maybe words would magically appear if she stared hard enough at the page. But her grin betrayed her, shaky and a little shy, nothing like the sly smirk she usually wore. Naruto just smiled, quiet, easy. He didn't need to say anything, watching her cheeks flush and her eyes dart anywhere but his was more satisfying than a dozen victories on the court or in the ring. Sabrina finally huffed out a laugh, pushing the notebook into her satchel to break the silence. You're impossible, she muttered, still pink. Yeah, Naruto said, voice low, steady. But you like it. That shut her up again, and he savored the rare win, the espresso machine humming behind them like applause no one else could hear. Sabrina tried to gather herself, pen clicking nervously against the spine of her notebook, but the grin tugging at her lips betrayed her. Naruto leaned in just a little, that rare, easy smile still on his face. So tell me, reporter, he said, voice low and steady, what's your type? Her head snapped up, eyes wide. For once, she didn't have a quick retort lined up. My type, she echoed, stalling. Yeah, he said, you asked me. Fair's fair. Sabrina's lips pressed together as she tried to fight the smile threatening to break out. She tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear, buying time. That's classified information. Naruto smirked, clearly enjoying the tables turning. Figures. Reporter won't answer her own question. Hey, she shot back, her voice still softer than usual. It's not that I don't have an answer. It's just complicated. Complicated how? She swallowed, eyes darting away before they came back to him. Let's just say, I like people who surprise me. People who aren't exactly who everyone thinks they are. Naruto raised a brow, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. That's a weird way of saying, you. Her cheeks deepened another shade of pink, and she shoved her notebook into her satchel with a little more force than necessary. You're insufferable, maybe, Naruto said, still smiling. But you didn't answer no. Sabrina's laugh slipped out, unsteady but real, as she moved toward the door. Don't push your luck, bookstore boy. Sabrina's brows lifted, but instead of dodging, she held his gaze. You really want to know? Yeah, she drew in a breath, tilting her head as if she were still deciding whether to tease or tell the truth. But then she just said it, blunt and straightforward. Messy red hair, shoulders that make hoodies look like they were made for them, a face that carries too many bruises but still manages a smile. Someone who works harder than anyone else I've seen, like he doesn't know how to stop. Naruto blinked, caught off guard for once, and in the pause that followed, the silence of the shop seemed to thicken around them. Sabrina smirked faintly, but it was softer now, almost shy under the pink still blooming in her cheeks. That's my type. For a moment, Naruto didn't say anything. He just watched her, the corner of his mouth twitching into the smallest, most genuine smile he'd worn all night. Guess I'm in luck then, he murmured. Sabrina shook her head, laughing under her breath as she leaned against the counter, closing the space just slightly between them. Don't let it go to your head, bookstore boy. But her eyes lingered, bright and unflinching, telling him she meant every word. Sabrina's grin lingered as she leaned against the counter, her cheeks still tinged pink, her eyes bright in the dim light of the shop. For once, she wasn't scribbling in her notebook or trying to spin his words into a headline, she was looking at him. She hesitated, chewing the inside of her lip before tilting her head. One last question, she said. Naruto raised a brow. You're not out of them yet. Her smile widened, small but genuine. Walk me home. For a second, Naruto just stared, like the words had landed heavier than he expected. Then, slowly, his grin returned, quieter this time, more real. Yeah, he said with a nod. I can do that. Sabrina's smile grew as she slipped her satchel over her shoulder. She stayed where she was, leaning against the counter, watching him as he went through the motions. Naruto flicked off the backroom lights first, the hum of the old fridge and espresso machine fading to silence. He grabbed the shop keys from under the counter, jingling them once in his hand before heading to the front. The ritual was automatic. Lights off, blinds pulled halfway, deadbolt turned with a heavy click. Sabrina pushed herself up and followed him to the door, her coat brushing against his arm when she stepped close. He held the door open for her, stepping out last. The bell gave its usual tired jingle before the door closed behind them, Naruto testing the handle twice out of habit until he was satisfied it was locked. Only then did he glance at her, hands shoved in his hoodie pocket, expression unreadable but softened by the faintest smile. All right, lead the way. Sabrina tilted her head, grinning as she fell into step beside him under the dim streetlights. Good to know, even bookstore boys have gentlemen in them. Naruto snorted, shaking his head as they started down the quiet street. Don't make it weird, but her laugh beside him said she already had. The night air was cooler than either of them expected, the kind that snuck in under coats and carried the faint smell of wet leaves. They walked side by side, quiet at first, the sound of their shoes on the pavement filling the spaces where words didn't. Naruto noticed her shiver before she said anything. Without a word, he tugged his hoodie over his head and held it out. Here, Sabrina blinked at him, then smirked as she slid it on, sleeves hanging long past her hands. Well, boyfriend material, Exhibit D, lends the hoodie without even being asked. Naruto groaned under his breath, but the corner of his mouth twitched up. She pulled her satchel up higher on her shoulder, fishing her pen out. I should be writing this down. And then she did, notebook open, pen scratching across the page as she read aloud in a mock journalist's voice. Observation 1. Bookstore boy notices I'm cold, hands over his hoodie without hesitation. Smells like coffee and soap. Very cliché, very effective. Naruto shook his head, shoving his hands into his pockets. You're ridiculous. Observation 2, she continued, scribbling as they turned down another block. Always takes the street side when we walk. Shifts a step ahead if someone's coming toward us. Very protective, very, She tapped the pen against her lips, pretending to consider. Chivalrous. Don't use words like that, he muttered, though his ears were turning pink. They came to a low stone wall along the sidewalk, barely knee-high, and Sabrina hopped up without thinking. The satchel bumped against her hip, nearly throwing her off balance. Naruto instinctively held out a hand. Observation 3, she announced, steadying herself with his grip. Offers a hand without comment. Doesn't even tease me for nearly tripping. When she jumped down a moment later, he caught her easily, bracing the weight of her body without much effort, one hand firm on her waist as he spun her once before setting her back on her feet. Sabrina laughed, her face bright and surprised, her cheeks flushed from more than just the cold. Oh, and observation 4, catches me like it's nothing. Adds unnecessary flourish, spin included. Naruto smirked, finally letting the banter play both ways. You writing that part down too? She pretended to scribble furiously. Absolutely. Exhibit E, unnecessarily charming when he thinks I'm not looking. Naruto shook his head again, but the smile on his face was impossible to hide. They walked longer than Naruto expected. Streetlights faded, replaced by crooked trees crowding close, their branches swaying like tired arms. The air turned heavier, carrying the damp smell of stone and earth. Naruto shoved his hands deeper into his pockets. You sure you live out here? Sabrina hummed, red coat bright against the shadows. Just a little further, turned into weaving past one cemetery, then another. The iron gates stretched endlessly, pale headstones poking up like broken teeth under the moon. Naruto's jaw tightened as his eyes scanned the dark rows. And that, he muttered, nodding to a squat brick building with a flickering light, is a morgue. Sabrina grinned, tugging his hoodie tighter around her. Convenient, right? If anything happens to me, I'm already halfway checked in. Naruto gave her a flat look. That's not funny. It's a little funny. She bumped his shoulder lightly, but he didn't crack. Finally, the path opened to a tall, old house standing between the cemeteries, its porch light casting a soft glow across the gravel. A carved wooden sign swung lazily from an iron post out front. Spellman Mortuary. Funerals, burials and rites. Naruto stopped dead in his tracks. You live in a funeral home? Sabrina turned, her grin widening as she stepped up onto the porch. Mortuary, technically. Family business. Naruto stared at the dark windows, the wrought iron fence, the endless headstones behind it all. That's worse. She laughed, the sound light against the heavy night. Guess that makes me the girl next door. If the next door is a cemetery. Naruto shook his head, still processing, but the smirk tugging at his mouth betrayed him. You're insane. Maybe, she said, softer now, her eyes glinting in the porch light. But you still walked me home. Naruto shifted, suddenly unsure what to do with his hands, his nerves prickling in the cool night air. Yeah, I did. For a moment, it felt like that was it, her hand on the doorknob, his weight shifting to leave. But then Sabrina pivoted back, stepping down one stair, her red coat brushing his hoodie as she rose on her toes. Before he could react, she pressed a quick kiss against his chin, the highest spot she could reach. Naruto blinked, frozen, caught entirely off guard. Sabrina's cheeks were pink, but her grin was steady. See you tomorrow, before class, and after school, at the movies. He stared, still half stunned. Movies, she said brightly, tugging his hoodie sleeve as she stepped back toward the door. And thanks, bookstore boy, her smile softened, almost shy, for the best first date. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving Naruto standing alone on the porch of Spellman Mortuary, surrounded by headstones and silence. He reached up, touched the spot where she'd kissed his chin, and let out a laugh under his breath, quiet, disbelieving. First date, For the long walk back, he couldn't stop smiling. The walk back felt shorter than it should have, though maybe that was because his head was still spinning. By the time Naruto got home, he didn't even bother with the TV or his books. He tossed his bag aside, grabbed his ball, and headed back out to the cracked court behind the apartments. The chain net rattled in the dark, the sound echoing under the half-dead streetlights. He dribbled hard, fast, like he could pound the thoughts out of his chest. Jab step, crossover, fake left, drive right. He spun, leapt, let the ball roll off his fingers, swish. But no matter how quick his moves, how sharp his form, his mind kept drifting. Her voice teased him about being boyfriend material. Her sly grin softens into something tangible. That porch light glinting off her pale cheeks when she leaned in. Naruto stopped mid-dribble, palm pressing against the ball, breath catching. The kiss hadn't even been on his mouth. Just his chin. Quick, awkward, rushed. And yet it left him warmer than a dozen perfect three-pointers, stronger than any win in the ring. He scoffed at himself, tried to shake it off, and bounced the ball again. It's nothing, he muttered. Just a kiss, barely even one, but as he set his feet and squared up for another shot, he caught himself smiling, wide, unguarded, the kind he couldn't fake. The ball arced through the air and dropped clean through the hoop. Swish, Naruto let it bounce away this time, dragging a hand down his face as if to hide the grin that just wouldn't quit. Best first date, he murmured to the empty court, and for once, the thought didn't make him tired. Perfect at something, I guess, he mumbled, continuing his practice with little thought besides Sabrina Spellman. By the time Naruto finally dragged himself inside, the clock on his nightstand was bleeding past midnight. His body was sore, his knuckles raw from shadowboxing and ball drills, but none of it quieted his mind. He lay back on his bed, hood still pulled over his head, staring at the ceiling until his eyes grew too heavy to fight. Slowly, he drifted, and the dream came, same as always. Naruto floated, weightless, in a vast dark room. No walls, no floor, just endless black stretching in every direction. His body hung like a puppet cut from its strings, head bowed, arms limp, suspended in water so still it might have been glass. But there was light, a deep, molten glow pulsed behind bars so massive they dwarfed him. Iron thicker than tree trunks, stretching higher than he could see. Firelight bled through the cracks, red and orange, alive, writhing, like the glow of a forge or the belly of something breathing. Naruto tried to move, to raise his head, but the water held him down. All he could do was stare at the reflection, the twisted bars cutting across his vision, warped by ripples that weren't there. And then the voice, low, endless, filling the dark, free. The word echoed, distorted, bleeding into itself until it became a constant hum. Free, free, free. It rattled in his bones, pressed against his chest, and seeped into the water around him. Naruto clenched his fists, teeth grinding, but he couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The light flared, brighter, hotter. Shadows twisted against the bars, something shifting behind them, massive and waiting. The voice thundered again, closer this time, almost human, almost hungry. Free. Naruto jerked awake, gasping, his sheets clinging to him with cold sweat. For a long moment, all he could hear was his own heartbeat slamming against his ribs. The room was dark, silent. Normal. He dragged a hand down his face, still tasting that word in the back of his throat and still seeing the bars burned into his eyelids. It had been with him his whole life, that dream. That voice. That cage. Naruto turned onto his side, pulling the blanket up over his head like it could keep the memory out. But his eyes stayed open long after. And somewhere in the silence, he couldn't help but think. It was the best first date of his life, and he still couldn't escape the nightmare. He never paid attention to the clock when this happened. Every night, this happened, for it would only read 230. Like every day, he woke up hours after, dribbling his basketball, staring at the chain hoop. Practice begins at 3:20. It will continue for hours before school. But today felt different, better. You love this place, don't you? Sabrina Spellman is odd. Within his short date with the girl, Naruto quickly learned how quirky the girl is. Hearing the sound of his basketball hitting the backboard, missing the hoop completely, the tired Uzumaki met the green eyes of said girl across the court. She's beautiful, truly. The determined storming green eyes with a slight blush on her cheeks from the cold morning air. Her shorter and smaller frame still has curves that any guy would want to see, along with that smile. Lips popping in red lipstick, having a smile of someone who has already won everything. She radiated confidence. Well, look at that. She began watching the redhead she came to visit at a somewhat empty court at 6 in the morning. I must be distracting. Very, but not a bad one, Naruto said, smiling lightly, jogging to meet her at the edge of the court. But why are you here? To interview my latest muse, of course. That and to recruit some muscle. She was clearly excited about the muscle part, lightly grabbing his arm, trying her best to feel his bicep under the hoodie. Her smile seemed to grow as she realized her hand didn't reach halfway around. Are you flexing? No, should I? Sabrina grinned, keeping her hand where it was, fingers lightly brushing against his arm. Depends, she said, feigning thoughtfulness. If you flex, I might have to reevaluate my article headline. Something like, local teen secretly superhero. Don't. Her smirk grew, and her cheeks began to redden to match her lipstick. Was this strong boy so nervous that her touching his arms brought such a blush? Her hand was squeezing, feeling every muscle in her right arm alone. Sabrina didn't stop at his bicep. Her fingers slid down, curious and deliberate, tracing the solid line of muscle beneath his hoodie, forearm, wrist, back to his shoulder again. She made soft, thoughtful hums like a scientist confirming her field notes, eyes alight with mischief. Naruto didn't freeze in her touchy moment, he was somewhat nervous. No, that wasn't the right word. He just as clueless, he didn't know what to do here. Should he stand here and do nothing? Should he flex? Should he touch her back? What would he touch, though? If he wasn't red now, the thought made it far worse. I can take my hoodie off, it's cold, and you're wearing a short-sleeve blouse. Sabrina blinked, caught mid-inspection. Her fingers froze on his sleeve, still curved lightly around his forearm. Take it off. What? So you can show off and be considerate. Naruto shrugged. There wasn't bravado in that meaning. Concern is apparent in his eyes and voice. Sabrina was at a basketball course early in the morning with the weather nearly 30 degrees. She has to be cold. You're cold, and I've got layers. Simple math. She narrowed her eyes playfully. You make that sound noble, but I'm starting to think you just want another entry in my notebook. He tilted his head. You still writing that thing? Nope, I finished and wanted to show you my writing before it's published. She answered with a specific tone in her voice as she tugged his hoodie up. While orange wasn't her favorite color, it was his. Naruto at that point really wasn't the one who removed his own hoodie. Instead, Sabrina quickly removed the layer with hunger, really. Biting at the edge of her red lipstick, she ignored the faint smudge it left on her teeth, eyes fixed on him. The long sleeve he wore was a deep, faded blue, the kind that caught the early light and hinted at the strength underneath without needing to show off. The sleeves stretched slightly over his forearms, the fabric tracing every motion like it knew his rhythm better than anyone. Sabrina exhaled softly through her nose, pretending it was because of the cold. Well, she said, looping his orange hoodie around her shoulders, guess I'll hold onto this for scientific purposes. Naruto watched as she tied the sleeves together at her front, the bright orange fabric almost glowing against the black of her skirt and leggings. Scientific, huh? She flashed him a grin. Of course. Control the variable, observe the reaction. He smirked. You talk really big, do I? Her tone was teasing, but her eyes were sharp, curious. You look different out of uniform, you know. Less hidden. Was he always this handsome? Hidden isn't always bad, to be honest. Besides yesterday, I never really looked at you, Naruto said, grabbing one of her hands and putting it to the side. Tied his sleeves together to make sure she didn't overdo it. Really, we see each other almost every day, more than every day, and you never noticed. Annoyed, she didn't sound too impressed, but never once let go. Even if her hands got in the way of whatever he was trying to do. I don't pay attention unless it's here or the gym. School, I pass, that's all that matters. Adrenaline junkie, guilty as charged, anyway. What is his interview? Need me to sign something off? He didn't know how this worked. He didn't understand many things. She blinked once, then laughed. You think I carry around release forms? Don't you journalists have, like, rules? Rules are for people who get sued, she said breezily, flipping open her notebook again. I just get quotes. Naruto raised a brow. Wouldn't you get sued for not following the rules? Naruto blinked as she fished something out of her satchel, a folded stack of freshly printed papers, edges still crisp and smelling faintly of ink. Sabrina's grin was a little too smug, a little too proud. You remember that thing I said I finished? She asked, eyes glinting. He tilted his head. The interview. She nodded, unfolding the top copy with a little dramatic flair. The header read Greendale Gazette, Boyfriend Material, Special Feature Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto leaned in, eyes narrowing as he scanned the page until he hit the headline scrawled in bold type, written almost like graffiti across the clean layout. Leave him alone, he's mine. Sabrina Spellman. For a long second, there was only silence. The wind caught the edge of the page, fluttering it against her fingers. Naruto blinked again, slowly. That's it, that's the article, that's the headline, she corrected, smugness blooming into a smile that was far too pleased with itself. The rest doesn't matter. He took the paper from her hand, turning it over like there could be something else on the back. You wrote this for the whole school to see. Printed it myself at the Gazette office, she said, brushing imaginary dust off her skirt. Hot off the press, you're officially public property, bookstore boy. Naruto raised a brow, the corner of his mouth twitching. Public, more like your property. Maybe, she said, stepping closer, her voice dropping to something quieter, more honest. But at least now everyone knows what I already figured out. He stared at her for a moment, eyes flicking from the bold words on the page to her green ones, bright and unflinching. You okay? Naruto stared at the headline again, the ink smudged slightly where her thumb had pressed too hard. Leave him alone, he's mine. It shouldn't have hit as hard as it did. But it did. For a while, he didn't say anything. The usual sharpness in his voice softened, almost hesitant. You know, he said finally, folding the paper once, eyes fixed on the ground, I've got no idea what that's supposed to feel like. Sabrina tilted her head. What do you mean? He gave a slight shrug, one hand rubbing the back of his neck. Being with someone, having someone, claim you, I guess. Or even want to. He let out a dry laugh, but it didn't sound like humor. All I know is fighting, training, working, and trying not to screw up enough to lose what little I've got. Relationships, stuff like this, it's just not something I ever got to learn. Sabrina's smirk faltered. The teasing edge she carried everywhere slipped for the first time. Hey, she said softly, her voice different now, careful. You're not supposed to learn that, you know. It's just something that happens. And if this goes the way I want it to go, you'll be my first, too. Naruto blinked, caught off guard by the shift in her tone. Her green eyes weren't teasing now, they were open, honest, a little nervous in a way he'd never seen. He let out a slow breath, the tension in his shoulders loosening. Guess we're both figuring it out then. Sabrina smiled, small and real. Guess so. You act like you have this figured out, though. Well, yeah, I'm a girly girl. What, I watch and read a horrible amount of romance, like way too much. She giggled, recalling the bookshelves and movie racks she had. The wind carried a loose chain net squeak across the empty court. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Naruto tucked the folded paper into his hoodie pocket, eyes still on her. Okay, reporter, he said, his voice steadier now. Show me what happens next. She tilted her head, that shy smile deepening into something bright. Gladly. The court was almost silent now. Just the faint hum of the streetlights and the soft, rhythmic creak of the chain net swaying in the breeze. The world felt suspended, like neither of them quite knew what to do with the weight that had settled between them. Sabrina tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, eyes darting to him, then down at the cracked pavement. You always come here this early? She asked, voice softer now, less about filling silence and more about keeping it from breaking. He didn't answer that so swiftly, something she noticed. Naruto has a surprisingly sharp mouth. He was quick to make her laugh, blush, and even stare with an odd question. However, his pause made her worry, knowing him for about 6 hours made her so worried. I don't sleep well. His words came out slow and lumped. He didn't want to say this out loud, something Sabrina noticed incredibly quickly, maybe far too quickly. Sabrina blinked, her hand tightening on the sleeve of his hoodie. Nightmares? She asked carefully. Her mind was already racing, flipping through half-remembered spell recipes, enchanted teas Aunt Hilda might brew for dreamless sleep, maybe something Ambrose would know. The problem solver in her was already working before he even answered. No, he said, but it came out like a question, his voice unsure even to himself. Sabrina frowned gently. Why is that a question? He let out a small breath, staring down at the court's cracked surface. Because I don't really know what to call them. Her fingers curled around his sleeve again, grounding him, steady. You can tell me the truth, you know, she said softly. Whatever it is, I'm not going anywhere. It wasn't demanding, and it wasn't pity. It was just a promise, plain and quiet, the kind that didn't need to be proven. Naruto looked at her then, really looked at the determination in her green eyes, the way she said I'll be here, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. For a boy who'd always been told to survive alone, it sounded like something impossible. He gave a small, crooked smile, more out of disbelief than amusement. You're good at this, you know that. Yeah, she said, smiling back, a little nervous, a little proud. Guess you'll just have to get used to it. He huffed a laugh, the heaviness easing just slightly. Not sure that's possible. Try me, she said, and for a second, just a second, he thought maybe he would. But unless you'd rather not, what's wrong? Naruto exhaled, his breath fogging in the cold air. He glanced away, toward the faded lines on the court, the half-lit hoop, the empty bleachers. Anywhere but her eyes. It's nothing, he said first, because that's what he always said. Sabrina didn't call him out, didn't press. She just waited, the silence patient, neither heavy nor judging. The kind of silence that gave him room to choose. Lucky for her, he was smarter than he looked. Well, he said after a moment, a breath fogging the air between them, it will be easier to tell you the truth. Sabrina smiled. Well, look at you, already getting the hang of this. He looked away, the muscles in his jaw tightening. She could see it, the tension, the way his brow furrowed as if each word weighed more than it should. His mouth opened and closed once before he folded his arms, like holding himself together was easier that way. Here, she said gently. Before he could ask what she meant, she leaned in and pressed a quick, feather-light kiss to the space between his cheek and his lips, not romantic, not heavy, just grounding. A reminder. You're here, you're safe, breathe. Naruto let out a long breath through his nose, eyes closing. The stiffness in his shoulders eased almost immediately, his posture softening. Sabrina couldn't help but smile, that small, quiet victory warming her from the inside out. Her aunts had always said it, sometimes, a gentle touch can bring down even the tallest wall. I have a dream, Naruto said finally, voice low. But not a nightmare. It's odd, not scary. She tilted her head. Odd how? I'm in water but not drowning. There's nothing in the water, and I don't feel cold, but it's hot, not like the water is hot. Like I'm heating the water. I can't move, but I can see the reflection of everything around me. It's like a sewer. I can see the pipes, some of which are broken, releasing water, and after a bit, everything starts glowing red. The light is coming behind a cell, but not for a person. I can walk through the cell, so it has to be a giant. And I can hear something saying free over and over again until I wake up at 2 a.m. every time. After his words finally ended, he didn't seem stressed or like this was a massive weight on his shoulders. Sabrina, her auntie would be proud of how neutral a look she was giving him. And then finally she smiled, kissing the other side of his mouth and cheek, slightly still missing his lips. He doesn't have the right to that yet. Probably will tomorrow. Thank you for sharing. I don't have nightmares, but I am terrified of failing or letting people help me, and I lie too much. He frowned slightly, not in judgment but confusion. Why would you tell me that? Tell someone you claim you lie too much might be a bad idea. Wait, you're lying right now, aren't you? She smiled as his eyes narrowed, with his bottom lip pushing his top lip up. He's clearly confused, and his brain is struggling to make sense of it. Because, she said, her hand brushing his arm again, it's fair. You told me your truth, figured you should know I'm not exactly put together either. For a moment, he just looked at her, and there was something new in his eyes, not surprise, not amusement, but recognition. You're weird, Spellman, he said at last, and this time it sounded almost fond. She smiled. Good, then we're even. Naruto shoved his hands into his pockets, half turning toward the exit. Have you eaten yet? Sabrina blinked, almost startled out of her thoughts. Oh, no, didn't think ahead that far. Come on then, he said, nodding toward the street. There's a diner a few blocks down. Food's decent, and the coffee's strong enough to wake the dead. High praise. Trust me, he said, a slight grin tugging at his mouth. That's as good as it gets from me. They started walking, their shoes scuffing against the sidewalk in easy rhythm. Somewhere between steps, her fingers brushed against his, once, twice, before he caught her hand properly. His grip wasn't tight, just steady, like the kind of quiet support she'd offered him minutes before. Sabrina didn't say anything about it. She just let it happen, watching their joined hands swing lightly between them as they walked. But even with the morning warming around them, her mind stayed cold. The way he'd described that dream, water, heat, broken pipes, a voice calling free, it didn't sound like anything she'd ever heard a normal person say. And she'd grown up surrounded by things that weren't normal. She stole a glance at him as they walked, his profile calm, unreadable. He looked fine now, relaxed, even. But the picture he'd painted still lingered in her mind, curling in the corners like smoke she couldn't wave away. It wasn't a nightmare, it wasn't random, it meant something, she could feel it in her gut. Still, she squeezed his hand once, grounding herself. Whatever it was, whatever was waiting behind those glowing bars in his dream, she wasn't about to let him face it alone. Naruto glanced at her at the squeeze, brow quirking. You good? Sabrina smiled, masking the worry as easily as breathing. Yeah, she said, just thinking. Dangerous habit, he teased. For you, always, she replied, her voice lighter again. He chuckled, the sound quiet but warm, and for now, that was enough. They walked on, the world still half asleep around them, the cracked sidewalks, the early light, their breath ghosting in the cold. And yet, beneath that ordinary calm, Sabrina's thoughts began to drift elsewhere. Because she wasn't ordinary, not really, she was a witch, well, half, witch, raised by two witches and a warlock of a cousin. Part of her belonged to the mortal world, school, coffee, awkward flirtations, morning air, and first crushes. But another part was claimed by something older. The Dark Lord's gift to her coven, thin but unmistakable, and it hummed quietly whenever she brushed too close to power or secrets. Living between worlds had taught her a kind of double vision, one eye on what people saw, the other on what they didn't dare to believe in. And what Naruto had described, the heat, the red glow, the word free, it didn't sound like just a dream. She could almost feel it under her skin, that wrongness. Like something calling out through him, not to him. Something she recognized in ways she didn't want to admit. Sabrina tightened her hand in his, grounding herself in the warmth of it, the reality of the street beneath their feet. He didn't notice the flicker in her expression, just kept walking beside her, eyes on the horizon, quiet and steady. She let him stay unaware, for now. But she'd be calling Ambrose the second she got home. Whatever lived in those dreams of his, wasn't going to stay quiet forever. The rest of the walk to school passed easily enough. The coffee helped, the sun climbed higher, and for a while they let the world sound normal again, sneakers scuffing against the pavement, low chatter from other students heading the same way, the occasional car rumbling by. By the time the red brick outline of Baxter High came into view, the air had already lost its morning chill. Naruto shifted his bag higher on his shoulder and shot her a sidelong glance. "You sure about your paper going out with that headline?" he asked. Sabrina smirked. "You mean, leave him alone, he's mine. It's called marketing, Uzumaki." He groaned, running a hand through his hair. "You're impossible." She loves how easily she was able to embrace him. Every time she mentioned that paper, his checks matched that hair. "Frequently," she said, matching his stride as they reached the front steps. Students were already spilling into the halls, their voices bouncing off the lockers, as the usual hum of Greendale life settled back into place. For a moment, it almost felt like the morning on the court hadn't happened, like they were just two students trying to beat the first bell rush. Naruto stopped at the steps of Baxter High, watching the morning crowd drift past. "So that headline's real, people are actually gonna see it." Sabrina smiled, tugging his hoodie tighter. "Already did, I may have passed a few copies around on my way here." "So like," he stopped talking, his cheeks moving like he was caught on his words and not sure how to process what to say. "We're dating, together, I can't tell." He is so embarrassed by those questions. It made her heart flutter seeing someone rumored to be so rude and cruel be so soft and childish. Sabrina blinked, caught between laughing and blushing herself. "Dating, together," she tilted her head, pretending to think. "Those sound suspiciously like definitions." Naruto rubbed the back of his neck, eyes darting anywhere but hers. "Yeah, well, people will start saying stuff. Thought I should know what to tell them." Her smile softened. "You don't have to tell them anything." He looked at her then, uncertain but curious. "So, what do you tell them?" "That it's none of their business," she said. Then, after a beat, her grin crept back. "But if someone asks, I might say we're figuring it out." Naruto nodded once, thoughtful, his mouth twitching like he wanted to smile but didn't trust it yet. "That's fair, fair," she repeated, liking how the words sounded between them. The morning noise swelled around them, doors opening, voices rising, but for a moment it felt like the whole world had slowed to their pace. Sabrina tugged his sleeve lightly, grounding him. "Hey," she said, tone gentler now. "You're doing fine." He huffed a small laugh, still pink around the ears. "Didn't realize there were rules." "The rules aren't that complicated. You compliment me always, I reward you when you do or do anything manly." Naruto blinked, the corner of his mouth twitching. "That's pretty one-sided, don't you think?" Sabrina lifted her chin, mock offended. "Excuse me, I'm giving you structure. Relationships thrive on structure. Pretty sure that's not what that means." "Pretty sure it is," she shot back, grinning as she adjusted the sleeves of his hoodie around her shoulders. "Now, say something nice." He thought for a second, then said, with the same straight-faced seriousness he'd used in class, "You're warm." She blinked, caught off guard, before laughing softly. "That's it, not pretty, not radiant. You stole my hoodie," he said, amused. "You're warm, accurate." Sabrina shook her head, still smiling. "You really are impossible, or honest." "Fine," she said, stepping closer, lowering her voice. "You're honest, that counts. Do I get a reward then?" He teased, surprising her with how casual his tone had gotten. She paused, pretending to consider, then leaned up just enough to tap her finger against his chin. "Maybe later tonight, after you help us with the fundraiser." "Fundraiser? Yep," Sabrina said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "The newspaper club's hosting one tonight, for the smaller clubs." Naruto raised a brow. "Smaller clubs," she nodded, her tone shifting from playful to earnest. "Yeah, debate, robotics, cooking, and even an art club. All the groups that don't get a dime because the school's budget apparently begins and ends with sports." He blinked. "So this is about money." "It's about fairness," she corrected quickly, her voice carrying a little more bite now. "Every time a team needs new jerseys, boom, instant approval. However, when the robotics team requests new circuit boards, it's suddenly not in the budget. The debate team runs on leftover printer paper. And don't even get me started on cooking club, half their gears from the 80s. Naruto just watched her, quiet, the corner of his mouth twitching as she kept going. "I mean, I like sports," she went on, pacing a little now. "I like watching them, I like when people win things, it's all fine. But you can't call it a school community when half the students have to hold bake sales to buy pencils." When she finally stopped to catch her breath, she noticed him smiling. "What?" she asked, still a little flushed from her mini tirade. "Nothing," he said, shaking his head. "Just didn't know you cared that much." "Of course I care," she said, crossing her arms but softening at his tone. "Someone has to." He nodded once, quiet again, that faint smile still there. "You're serious about this?" "Always," she said, chin lifting slightly. "The Gazette's sponsoring it, So if I want to talk about fixing things, I should actually try to fix them. Hence, fundraiser. Tonight, 6 o'clock, Naruto gave a slight shrug. Guess that's reason enough. Good, she said, satisfied. Then, with a grin creeping back in, she added, besides, it'll make a great article headline, local hero lifts tables, redeems humanity. He snorted under his breath. Sounds exaggerated, but aren't we going to see a movie tonight? Sabrina blinked, caught off guard. Wait, you remembered that? He shrugged, casual but honest. You said before class and after school, then something about the movies. Figured it was a plan. Her grin returned, softer this time. You're right, it was. The Roxy's got a double horror feature tonight. Starts at 11. Naruto's head tilted slightly. Horror. Yep, she said, clearly delighted. Old school classics, The Thing from Another World and The Fog. Proper black and white, creepy music, practical effects, the works. He blinked, shifting his weight like he wasn't sure he heard her right. At 11, at night, best time for it, she said proudly. You can't watch horror in daylight, it ruins the mood. Right, he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. The mood. Sabrina's grin widened immediately. Oh no, she said, reading his expression in a heartbeat. You're not good with scary movies, are you? He scoffed, but a little too fast. I didn't say that, your face did, she teased. You look like someone who checks under the bed before turning the lights off. Yeah, well, he said, glancing away, I like knowing what's under there. She laughed softly, the sound light in the cool morning air. Don't worry, I'll protect you. He looked back at her, deadpan. You're, like, 5'3". And hey, like 80 pounds. There's nothing wrong with being 5'2", and thank you, she corrected, holding up a finger. And I've seen more scary things than most people. Naruto shook his head, trying to hide the faint smile forming on his lips. This sounds like a setup. Maybe, she said, tucking her hair behind her ear. But it'll be fun. Fundraiser first, then popcorn. You're trying not to scream during the movie. I don't scream, he said quietly, though his tone made her laugh again. Good, she said, turning toward the doors, her voice still teasing. Then I guess I'll find out tonight. He watched her go, exhaling through his nose as his hands slipped into his pockets. Great, he muttered. Midnight ghosts. What could go wrong? But there was a hint of a smile when he said it. See you after classes then. With another peck on the corner of his mouth, the two went their own ways. By the time classes ended, the gym had transformed into a construction zone, complete with half-built tables, tangled extension cords, and overly enthusiastic volunteers. Front and center stood Elliot Crane, student council vice president, senior, and self-appointed, project lead, for the fundraiser. He looked like he'd been born holding a clipboard, pressed shirt, perfect hair, a sweater draped over his shoulders like a uniform, and that smile people use when they expect to be obeyed. Sabrina, clipboard in hand, stood beside him as second in command, though between the two, she was the only one actually doing the commanding. Her notes were covered in ink smudges and coffee stains, but she knew exactly where everything went. Naruto showed up right on time, hoodie sleeves pushed up, his usual calm expression in place. Ah, perfect, Elliot said, spotting him immediately. You're the bookstore kid, right? We need those tables from the back closet moved to the far wall. Just, be careful not to scrape the floors. They were refinished last semester. Naruto didn't respond right away. He just stared at Elliot for a beat, unreadable, before giving a short nod and heading toward the storage room. Sabrina caught it, that barely there twitch in his jaw, the subtle way his fingers curled before he exhaled. Not anger, exactly, more like patience being measured out by the second. She made a mental note, filed away, quiet but deliberate. Naruto worked quickly, moving the heavy tables one at a time with ease. Every time he passed, a few of the other students stepped out of his way, eyes wide. He wasn't showing off, just efficient. Controlled. Elliot, however, couldn't help himself. Maybe watch how you set those down. He called out, crossing his arms. They're school property. Naruto froze for half a second. His gaze flicked up to Elliot, calm, flat, before he gently placed the table exactly where it needed to go and walked back without a word. Sabrina bit the inside of her cheek to keep from smiling. When he passed her again, she tilted her clipboard slightly and said under her breath, "You're handling this really well." Trying to, he muttered, not looking up. Keyword being trying, she whispered back. That earned her the slightest twitch of a smile before he grabbed the following table. Elliot kept pacing, supervising, more than helping, adjusting banners, giving out mismatched orders, and taking credit whenever someone finished a task. Naruto didn't argue once, but the way his shoulders tensed with each new instruction didn't go unnoticed. By the time the setup was nearly done, Sabrina had seen enough to know two things. 1. Naruto didn't take well to being bossed around by people who'd never lifted anything heavier than a clipboard. And 2. That tiny twitch, the one she'd noticed earlier, wasn't about irritation. It was a restraint. He wasn't the kind of guy who caused trouble. He was the kind who'd been through enough of it to know when to hold back. When Elliot finally wandered off to check on refreshments, Sabrina moved closer, her voice low enough only he could hear. "You know," she said, "you're allowed to tell him off if he gets too bossy." Naruto shook his head, dusting his hands off. "Doesn't help anything." "Maybe not," she said softly, glancing toward where Elliot had gone. "But it'd be fun to watch." That earned her a quiet laugh, low and real, the kind she didn't hear from him often. By 6 o'clock, the gym had transformed. String lights zigzagged over the bleachers, posters for every small club lined the walls, and the faint scent of popcorn and sugar filled the air. Tables were stacked with cupcakes, raffle tickets, and flyers, while the sound of music buzzed from a Bluetooth speaker someone had borrowed from the AV room. The fundraiser was in full swing. Sabrina stood by the sign-in table, double-checking a list with Roz Walker, who was balancing 2 clipboards at once and somehow still managing to sip a soda. "Not bad for one day's notice," Roz said, scanning the crowd. "You actually pulled this off, Spellman." "We pulled it off," Sabrina corrected, a proud smile tugging at her lips. "And if we raise enough, robotics gets their new circuit boards, debate gets new mics, and cooking club can finally replace that fire hazard they call an oven." Roz laughed. "You make it sound like we're saving the world." "Maybe we are, one bake sale at a time." Before Roz could reply, Harvey Kinkle appeared, carrying a box of sketchpads under one arm and wearing a paint-splattered flannel. The art club's corner display was already drawing attention: portraits, handmade pins, and a giant sign that read, "Drawn from Greendale." "Hey, Sabrina," Harvey said, flashing a friendly grin. "Roz said you might need extra hands. Art club's all set, but we've got supplies if you want to decorate the raffle booth." Sabrina smiled. "Thanks, Harvey, you're a lifesaver." "Just doing my civic duty," he said with an easy shrug. "Roz and I were talking. That article of yours is everywhere, by the way." Her grin faltered a little. "The Gazette one, the one with the headline," Roz added, teasing. "Leave him alone, he's mine." "Bold move, Spellman," Harvey laughed. "Whole school's talking about it. Didn't know you and Naruto were, you know." Sabrina rolled her eyes, cheeks warming. "We're not, it's just, it was a joke that became, slightly less of a joke." Roz smirked. "Slightly." Sabrina ignored her, pretending to check the cash box, but her eyes drifted across the gym. She hadn't seen Naruto since the setup. He'd disappeared somewhere after Elliot's long-winded speech about student unity and vision. She frowned, setting down her clipboard. "I'm gonna go check on something." Roz raised an eyebrow. "Something or someone?" Sabrina only gave her a look and started weaving through the crowd. She half expected to find Naruto outside cooling off, maybe needing air after all the noise. He wasn't exactly the social type, but when she reached the far end of the gym, she stopped. He wasn't avoiding the crowd. He was in the middle of it. Naruto was surrounded. A whole crowd of kids, maybe a dozen, ranging from 5 to 10, had gathered around the basketball game, and somehow he'd become the center of gravity. The little ones were laughing, shouting his name, tugging at his sleeves as he passed out foam balls and high fives like it was second nature. He wasn't just managing them, he was keeping up with them. One kid tried to steal the ball mid-dribble, and Naruto dodged with exaggerated slow-motion steps, pretending to stumble while the others howled with laughter. Another tried to shoot from too far away, so he lifted her easily, a tiny girl with bright braids and sparkly sneakers, setting her on his shoulders. "All right, you've got the high ground," he said, steadying her legs with one hand. "Make it count." She tossed the ball. Swish. The net rippled, and the whole group erupted in cheers. Naruto whooped right along with them, grinning ear to ear as the girl clapped her hands over his hair like she'd just conquered the world. Sabrina stopped a few steps away, unable to look anywhere else. He was glowing in a way she'd never seen before, not literally, but something about his smile, the easy warmth in it, made her chest ache. This wasn't the quiet, guarded boy from the bookstore or the basketball court. This was someone completely open. And it wasn't just her who noticed. Across the gym, a few mothers from the cooking club had stopped what they were doing to watch. They whispered to each other, smiling, one of them nudging the other when Naruto crouched down to tie a kid's untied shoe. Sabrina couldn't blame them. There was something magnetic about it, the way he carried the little girl like it was the most natural thing in the world, the way his laugh filled the space, not loud but full. It wasn't performative, it was just him. He had a way of matching their energy completely, kneeling to their level, laughing at their jokes, and taking their challenges as seriously as if they were serious tournaments. It was like watching sunlight interact with gravity, everything bright in the room just leaned toward him. Sabrina felt her heart stutter a little, an unfamiliar warmth curling in her chest. She'd liked him before, the mystery, the quiet strength, the flashes of humor, but this was something else. He'd be a good father, she realized before she could stop herself. The thought slipped in, quiet but confident. The kind of man who'd listen, who'd kneel to fix a scraped knee, who'd protect without ever making it about himself. She wasn't sure what surprised her more, thinking it, or how right it felt. Naruto turned at that moment, catching her watching him. He grinned, wide and genuine, eyes bright under the gym lights, and waved her over with the hand that wasn't keeping the little girl steady. "Spellman," he called, voice easy, teasing. "You hiding, or you gonna help coach my team here?" Sabrina blinked, realizing too late that she'd been staring. She shook her head quickly, but her smile betrayed her. "You seem to have it handled. Could use a referee," he said, still smiling. "Right," she said, crossing her arms, trying to sound composed. "Because 5-year-olds are terrible at following the rules." He chuckled. "You'd be surprised." The little girl on his shoulders tugged on his ear. "Who's that?" she asked, pointing at Sabrina. Naruto smirked, adjusting her slightly. "That's the boss," he said. "She's in charge of this whole thing." The girl squinted at Sabrina, clearly unimpressed. "She doesn't look bossy." Sabrina laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." Naruto gave her a look that said he'd agree. Then he let the girl climb down, steady and patient, before giving the group a little wave. "All right, team," he said. "Take 5. Go grab snacks before they're gone." The kids scattered instantly, squealing about cupcakes and juice boxes. When the last of them darted off, Naruto turned back to her, a slight grin still playing at the corner of his mouth. "What?" he asked. Sabrina shook her head slowly, her voice now softer. "Nothing. Just, didn't know you were good with kids." He shrugged, rubbing the back of his neck. "Kids are easy, they say what they need or think, or it's clear on their face. Easy to match them, you know." She smiled faintly. "You're better at it than you think." Naruto looked away, but the small, bashful smile stayed. And for the first time that night, Sabrina realized she wasn't watching a mystery anymore, just a boy who carried a little bit of warmth wherever he went, and maybe didn't even know it. "I never would have thought you would handle all this so well," Sabrina said once more, wrong about her abduction of him, bad can be a good thing. Naruto glanced at her, brow raised just slightly. "Wrong how?" She hesitated, the corner of her mouth lifting. "I thought dragging you into this would be a disaster, that you'd hate it, hate the people, hate me for making you come." He smirked faintly. "You're saying abducting me for a school fundraiser wasn't the worst idea you've had?" "Not even close," she said, her tone light but her eyes warm. "Sometimes being wrong turns out better than being right." Naruto let out a quiet breath, his gaze softening. "Yeah," he said, "sometimes it does." For a moment, neither of them said anything, the laughter and chatter from the gym fading into a softer hum around them. Sabrina found herself smiling again, small but sure, like she'd finally started to understand him. And maybe, she thought, he was starting to understand her too. "That and I'm working really hard for that reward." Sabrina blinked, caught off guard before laughter slipped out, low and genuine. "Wow," she said, shaking her head. "Ruining a perfect moment for a bribe." "Not a bribe," he said, straight-faced. "Motivation." "Uh-huh." She crossed her arms, still smiling. "And what exactly do you think you're earning?" He shrugged. "Don't know yet. You said you'd decide." Sabrina tilted her head, pretending to think. "You really trust me with that?" Naruto met her eyes, steady, that slight grin still there. "Yeah," he said, "I do." It wasn't teasing, not really, and that made her heart skip just a little. She tried to cover it with a smirk. "Careful, bookstore boy, you keep saying things like that, and you might actually earn something good." He chuckled softly. "Guess I'll hold you to it." Before she could come up with something clever to say back, Roz's voice cut through the gym again. "Sabrina, they're drawing raffle winners." Sabrina sighed, glancing toward the stage, then back at him. "Duty calls." "Go," Naruto said, his voice softer now. "I'll pack up the basketball stuff." "You sure?" He nodded. "Yeah, go win something for your club." She lingered just long enough to flash him one more smile. "Don't think you're getting out of that reward, though." Naruto smirked. "Wouldn't dream of it," and as she turned to rejoin the crowd, he watched her go, her laugh mixing with the noise of the gym, before quietly getting back to work, the faintest smile still playing on his lips. The next round of noise came from the far end of the gym, sneakers squeaking, the echo of a whistle, and the unmistakable sound of a ball hitting the backboard. Sabrina looked over just in time to see Elliot waving a clipboard like a flag. "All right, everyone, the one-on-one tournament is starting. Players, line up by the bleachers." Roz leaned close, grinning. "Guess that's your cue." Sabrina blinked. "My cue." Roz nodded toward the far side of the gym. Naruto was already walking that way, rolling his sleeves up, the faintest smirk on his face. "Oh," Sabrina murmured, realization dawning. "Right, that tournament." Roz laughed under her breath. "You didn't tell me you brought actual talent." Sabrina smiled, trying to look composed, but she couldn't hide the flicker of pride bubbling in her chest. "I might have had a feeling he'd be good." "Good," Roz said. "He's about to embarrass half the basketball team." Naruto didn't look particularly excited as he joined the line, but there was something about his stance, the easy balance in his shoulders, the quiet focus in his eyes, that made the others around him take a half step back. Elliot, ever the announcer, cleared his throat dramatically. "All right, Folks, we've got 16 players signed up for tonight's bracket. Quick games to 5 points, winner moves on. Remember, sportsmanship, no fouls, and try not to break anything valuable. Naruto just nodded, grabbing the ball when it rolled his way. He spun it once on his palm, the faint smirk still there. Uzumaki, Elliot said, looking at the sign-up sheet. You're up first. Lucky me, Naruto said, stepping onto the court. His opponent, a tall junior from the varsity team, offered a polite grin. Go easy on me, man. Naruto gave a short, amused laugh. No promises. The whistle blew. From the sidelines, Sabrina leaned against the bleachers, arms crossed, trying not to look too invested. Roz wasn't helping. Oh, he's definitely showing off, Roz said, half whispering, half laughing. Maybe a little, Sabrina admitted. But her eyes never left him. Naruto moved differently when he played, smooth, measured, like every step had a purpose. The other player tried to guard close, but Naruto slipped past him effortlessly, the ball rolling off his fingertips with that soft swish that drew a cheer from the crowd. 2 points in, Sabrina found herself smiling without realizing it. He wasn't just good, he was calm, controlled, the same quiet confidence she'd seen with the kids, but sharper now, like the gym, the lights, and the noise all fell away until it was just him in the game. When his opponent tried to drive past, Naruto blocked cleanly, spinning the ball back into his hands and sinking another shot. 4 points, Elliot shouted over the mic. Game point for Uzumaki. The crowd clapped and whistled. Even a few of the teachers were leaning forward. Sabrina glanced around, realizing how many people were watching, how many noticed him. The quiet kid from the bookstore. The rumored loner. Now they were seeing what she'd already started to figure out. He wasn't just some mystery. He was someone who could command a whole room without even trying. The final point came fast. A feint left, a pivot, and a clean jump shot that kissed the rim before dropping through. The gym erupted. Naruto caught the rebound, dribbling lazily once before tossing the ball back to Elliot. Next game, he asked, casual as ever. Elliot grinned. If you can still walk after the next 10, sure. Naruto smirked, walking back toward the sideline. When he passed Sabrina, she raised an eyebrow. You were supposed to help the fundraiser, not steal the spotlight. He shrugged. Helping. The more people cheer, the more tickets they buy. Ah, she said, pretending to think. So it's charity with style. Something like that, he said, the corner of his mouth twitching. She shook her head, but her smile remained. You're impossible. Naruto shot her a sideways look, amused. You said that before. Yeah, she said softly, almost to herself. And I keep being right. By the time the last